Do not believe the hype. Do not believe the lies the Democrat Party has said. We had their ads taken down. Okay, they were running ads around the country and in swing districts, trying to convince people that Republicans were going to gut Medicaid. It's just simply not true, and that's why their ads and billboards had to come down. We sent them a cease and desist letter because we pointed out they were lying. By the way, the Democrat leaders in Washington have zero credibility with the American people. Remember, they tried to tell us for the last 4 years that Joe Biden was an exceptionally talented, brilliant, on-point leader. Okay, they don't have any credibility on any of this. We're going to prove the opposite. The committee markups, as Leader Scalise noted, we have 7 committees marking up components of the big, beautiful bill this week. We have 4 others next week. That third week that we return, the Budget Committee will merge all that together into the one big, beautiful bill, and you will see the results. We are going to preserve the programs. We're not gutting Medicaid. We're going to reduce fraud, waste, and abuse, which every single American should be applauding.
The Democratic National Committee has just announced the Fight to Save Medicaid, a concerted effort to block a bill that seeks to cut social programs in order to pay for tax cuts.
This budget bill that they are talking about passing right now, they are moving it through the House and the Senate. It's a pretty simple story. It's about $1 trillion in cuts to the Medicaid program, and that means automatically millions of people all across the country lose their access to health care. And guess what? It's $1 trillion in tax cuts for the richest 1%, right? So when I say it's the most massive transfer of wealth and resources from the poor and the middle class to the rich in this country, that's the story.
Currently, the Republicans hold a 3-seat majority in the House, so Democrats are launching a pressure campaign on 4 of the most vulnerable Republicans. These include Don Bacon of Nebraska, Michael Lawler of New York, Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, and Tom Barrett of Michigan. 3 of them represent districts that actually went to Kamala Harris back in November, but Barrett's district only went to Trump by a very slim margin.
That they have stopped and suspended next week's Medicaid cuts because they're getting too scared. Nicole Maliotakis of Brooklyn wants to vote for these Medicaid cuts. Mike Lawler of Westchester County wants to vote for these Medicaid cuts. Congressman Lolota wants to vote for these Medicaid cuts right here in New York. So we know that our assignment now is that they get a strong message. They vote for this, they're gone next year.
To run this campaign, the DNC, along with the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, is going to organize people's town halls in these lawmakers' districts, while also encouraging voters in those districts to call and email their representatives telling them how they would like for them to vote on the bill. The goal with this campaign is to signal to Republicans representing seemingly blue districts, or at least districts that lean a little bit blue, that their political futures are not guaranteed, especially if they demonstrate an unwillingness to do their jobs, i.e. to represent the will of the people that they represent. From DC Chair Ken Martin, the American people are furious at Trump and Republicans' dangerous attacks on their health care and vulnerable Republican representatives. Barrett, Bacon, Lawler, and Fitzpatrick will seal their political fate if they go along with Trump's disastrous budget. Our representatives must serve the people, not ignore them. Republicans will either learn that lesson now or at the ballot box. So the bill in question, Trump's beautiful bill, would reduce government spending by $1.5 trillion and extend Trump tax cuts from his first term in office, costing $4.5 trillion. With the enacting of this bill, Medicaid stands to lose $800 billion in funding. SNAP also could lose $200 billion in funding. These programs would likely be unable to survive without those funds. So in other words, the poor and the disabled in this country would suffer unheard of losses just to pay for tax cuts for the rich. There is some hope that more moderate Republicans, not the MAGA ones, will be unwilling to vote for the bill unless concessions are made and protections are placed upon the populace. However, reports have come out earlier this week that despite the doge of it all, federal spending is actually up, and significant portions of that increased spending can be attributed to social programs like Medicare and Medicaid, veteran and military services, Social Security, etc. So while it might feel fun to see that Doge is actually pointless or that Doge isn't doing what it claimed it would do, I fear that these reports will just help to further bolster the Republican talking point that these social programs upon which millions of Americans depend are in fact wasteful and need to be cut. So are Democrats finally starting to play this game that we call politics? Is it too little too late? Is this just a desperate attempt for Democrats to show their voters that they're finally ready to fight for them despite years of just not doing enough? Maybe, but personally, I'm not going to complain about how they didn't do anything for so long once they are finally doing something. The thing with politics in a democracy is that so much of it is about optics. And we live in a time when people are woefully uneducated about the government and the world around them. They seek and celebrate short-term wins without thinking about the long-term effects of those wins. And we've all conditioned our brains to think in snippets of thoughts that can easily be posted on social media rather than allowing ourselves to flesh out complete and complex thoughts. And as a result, let's say that people actually listened to progressives and liberals nearly 10 years ago when the dog whistles about Trump's authoritarian rhetoric first started to sound, right? 10 years ago, 2015, 16-ish. We all said that his coining of the term fake news was going to be a problem and that demonizing the media and the press was often one of the very first things that dictators do as they're attempting to seize power from the masses. He also said that Mexican people were bad hombres, and we all laughed and said that's funny because it was so ridiculous, but realistically, that was another dog whistle. But no one listened back then because the problems we were warning about weren't at the time present or obvious. So people just said that we were all overreacting and being dramatic and hyperbolic. Fine. Now we've come to a place where everything we said was going to happen is happening or will likely soon happen or they want it to happen. People are finally starting to come around in their thinking, but even now, the people who most fully bought into what Trump has been selling them are unwilling or unable to see or truly comprehend what is unfolding before them. Liberals and progressives are starting to feel validated, but honestly, I wish we would have been wrong about everything we foresaw. However, if things hadn't played out the way that they did, if all of this hadn't been allowed to happen, we likely would still be having these endless circular discussions around various what-if scenarios, debating what could have or would have happened if certain things hadn't happened first. Now we don't have to have those debates or disagreements because we're all living through this reality. And I wonder if, had Trump lost in 2016, all of the things that are happening now would have still happened, but maybe just further on down the road. I don't know where we end up with all of this any more than anyone knows for certain. I don't pretend to know things I can't possibly know, but the best case scenario that I'm hoping for is that the long-term gains we actually get in exchange for this short-term pain, and I'm not talking about tariffs, I'm talking about all of Trumpism, is that somehow the parties as they stand today get revamped and reinvigorated, the stagnancy and corruption in government, actual government inefficiency is lessened or eliminated, and the people's will is more fully represented within our government. In other words, I don't want to hear about people like Newt Gingrich saying out loud that the American people don't actually care about what our government officials are doing on our behalf just because the news cycle can't last forever. All right, that's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks.